Hi everyone, welcome. I am Shani-faye Chambers from the Wellness Chambers, and this is my YouTube channel talking into all things health, wealth, wellness, personal development, spirituality, healing, evolution, you name it. I love it. I am talking today into shame responses, which is something that not many people know about. A lot of people don't even really recognize what shame is doing to them or even aware of it, and I'll tell you why. Because shame Shame is actually one of the hardest emotions for us to feel, sit with, embody, recognize, because shame is the feeling or the belief that there is something wrong with us, that we're somehow dysfunctional, broken, not good enough, not pretty enough, not smart enough, not skinny enough, not a good enough mother, not a good enough father, not a good enough partner, parent, you name it. There's somewhere somehow that there's something wrong with us. That's what shame is about. The ego, however, does not want us to buy into the belief or feel shame, because if we buy into the belief that there is actually something wrong with us, then we could get kicked out of the village. And if we get kicked out of the village, that is instant death, because there's no one there to protect us against the wildebeest. So the ego actually sees shame as a massive threat to survival. And you'll see this happen. Have you ever gone to someone and tried to bring something up with them very gently, that they've, done something wrong, or they missed something or forgotten something, and they instantly get angry and deflect and project back onto you and basically attack you? That's a shame response, because what happens is the ego doesn't want you to feel shame, and it becomes survival, which triggers the autonomic nervous system into a survival response, also known as a trauma response. So I'll do another section on trauma responses, but the trauma responses that most people know about is fight, flight, freeze. There's a fourth that a lot of people don't know about, and that's fawn. That is the people pleaser. There's also flop and frenzy, but they're a lot rarer. It's usually one of those first four. So like I said before, when that person has just, you've tried to bring something up and they've gone and attacked you, that's their fight response. Or a shame response might turn into fawning, where it's like, oh my God, I feel so bad. Okay, let me just clean the house and do this for you and do that for you, or they might just shut down and freeze, or you might bring it up with them and they just check out on their phone or they leave. That's a flight response. So what happens when we do go into a trauma response is that 75% of the brain shuts down, because you're in survival mode. So you no longer have access to other emotions, logic, reasoning, awareness, empathy, the bigger picture, memory. A lot of it's out the window because you're focused purely on survival and winning, basically. So this happens a lot in relationships. My partner and I run beautiful couples retreats where we go through a bit of a blueprint of what happens when you personally go into conflict and which trauma responses and all the rest. And we teach that if you can identify the shame first, then a lot of the conflict actually doesn't happen, or it is resolved and dissolved very, very, very quickly. Because basically what's happening is that you're feeling shame that your partner's upset with you for whatever reason, you feel not good enough, and then that triggers these responses, and then all of a sudden there's a big conflict based on the trauma responses, not based on what actually is going on. I'll give you a really good example for this. So my partner and I, we work a lot with all this kind of stuff. We also have had very challenging relationships and childhoods and a lot of trauma ourselves, which we work through together. One of his big wounding was betrayal, was women cheating and taking drugs behind his back and stuff like that. So we'd been together for about a year at this stage, and I had a 40th birthday coming up that I was attending and he couldn't go. And we started talking about it, and he started to express that he had some stuff coming up for him around it, that he was afraid that I was going to, go take drugs and end up sleeping with ex-boyfriends from high school or something like that, which I turned around and laughed, because it kind of sounded a bit comical to me at the time, but this is him bringing up his trauma, and where I usually am so good at holding space, I laughed at him. And he's like, don't laugh at me. And I'm like, oh my God, you're right. I can't believe I just did that. I'm so sorry. And then he started saying it again. And I laughed again. And he's like clearly upset with me now because I'm laughing at him trying to, be very vulnerable with what's going on for him. And then I got really angry and I started getting really angry and being like, oh, for fuck's sake, we've been together a year. Like, why don't you trust me yet? And I started getting really annoyed, and we were actually on our way to run a couples retreat. So we're like, look, we've got a deal that, if we need to shelf something, we shelf it and we circle back when we're both regulated, because we clearly weren't regulated in that moment. So we just come back to love and we deal with it when we've got the time and space to. And, I was teaching this all weekend, and by the end of the weekend, I've gotten home and I'm like, okay, let me ask the question that I teach couples to ask. What is the shame that I feel around this? And I just went, oh my God. I felt shame that I hadn't been a good enough girlfriend for him to no longer have that wounding. I felt shame that I wasn't good enough. I haven't shown up enough, that I haven't somehow taught him that it's safe to trust. That's not on me. That's something that takes a couple of years of being in safety before those old patterns can completely be resolved. That doesn't happen overnight. It doesn't happen in a year, and I know that. But what had happened is that shame that I wasn't even aware of had come up, of being, I haven't done enough. I haven't been good enough. I haven't shown him enough. I haven't, all this that I'm doing, it's not enough. That shame. And that triggered me into the flight response, which was laughing. I just laughed at him because it was like I couldn't sit with what it was that I was feeling. And then I got angry and I went into a fight response. So as soon as I recognized that, I was like, oh my God, yeah, that makes so much sense. And I went and spoke to him about it. He's like, babe, that is not your job. I'm like, I know it's not my job, but that was the shame. That was the trigger. And so anyway, we let it go. And then the next time it came up and he needed me to hold space for him just to move through whatever was coming up, I was back regulated and able to hold space for him again. So it was a great eye opener for me to be like, yeah, it all really does come down to what is the shame that I'm feeling right now that's triggering me into these reactions. So it takes a little while to get your head around it. But once this lands, once this drops, like, it was actually Tim, my business partner, Emma, taught us about shame, but Tim, my partner, has always been brilliant at it. Like whenever something happens and we'll get triggered, we'll take 5 minutes space and I'll come back. He's like, it's just some shame I'm feeling around X, Y, and Z. And I'm like, oh, wow, yeah. So we've actually really gotten into the habit of just going, what is the shame that I'm feeling? Because then the rest of the story can dissolve. It comes up and it just gets released. So give it a go. Share this with your partner. Have a chat with them about it. Have a look at the video on trauma responses, because that's also very important to know, because once those trauma responses are triggered, yeah, 75% of the brain shuts down. You're not gonna get resolution in those times. So you need to be aware of what's happening. So go check out that video.